So let's go back to 2017 for a moment. I was 21 years old. I was living in an extremely small dorm room with 4 other of my college football teammates. About, I would say, a little bit smaller than if you take from here to here to here to here. We had 4 big football players all living in one little environment. And we were all fighting for the same dream, to make it in football. And I can remember I was living in downtown Brooklyn, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and I was living on $100 a week, which can barely get you anywhere in New York City. And over the next 6 months of that journey, I quickly started realizing that this dream was not going to work out. I can remember constant nights of not being able to sleep, waking up in a cold sweat, being nervous about what my next move was going to be. I didn't have much money. I didn't seem to have a purpose, and the one thing I loved most was falling right before my eyes. So in that moment of uncomfort, it forced and pushed me to new boundaries to start thinking differently. And what I started to do is I simply started studying the most successful people in the world, whether they're athletes, musicians, entrepreneurs, politicians. And I started studying all these different people, and I said, you know, what is unique about all of these people? They all look different. They all come from different parts of the world. They all had different sets of challenges and obstacles throughout their career. What was unique about it? And I found one common trait. They were avid learners. They were obsessed with improving their craft, with reading, and learning from any single person that they could find that could make their profession, their business, their dream, their goals better. And so the first thing I did, even though I had no money, I had pretty much no resources at the time, I walked about a half a mile down the street from my dorm room in Brooklyn, New York, and I went to a local bookstore. And what I would do is I would sit there for 2 to 3 hours every day after class or after I got out of practice, and I would just read. Now, I was a person that was self-proclaimed ADHD. I couldn't focus. I didn't like reading, or so I told myself. But what I actually didn't do is I just wasn't focusing on things I was passionate about. So I would read for 20 minutes. I would take a break. I would read 30 pages. I would stop. I would read 5 pages. Then I would stop. The only difference was, even though my learning was sporadic, even though I wasn't sitting in a dark room reading for 3 hours straight, I was making progress. And everyone else that might have been in a similar situation as I was, they weren't doing anything about it. And so what I started noticing over that next 5 to 6 months, while I was still in a rough time, I felt like a different person. I can remember 6 months later, my coaches, my teammates, people that I would come across maybe in a restaurant or a store or at my school, just started treating me different. I almost had a different aura, different presence that I was carrying. So I came up with my next strategy. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I said, you know what, I'm going to move back to Houston, Texas, because I have connections. I had no connections. I was just from there. It made me feel good. So I said, you know what, I'm going to move back. I'm going to sleep on a family member's couch. I'm going to Uber across the city of Houston and save every penny I can and try to get my business degree at University of Houston. So I was ready for my plan. I had an idea to go get a job here, to do this. Next thing you know, the job fell through. Next thing you know, a week later, I get to University of Houston. They're doing orientation, which is supposed to be the most exciting time, and they're doing roll call. Suddenly, they say my name. They go, Mittelander. I go, yep, I'm here. She goes, I need to talk to you. I said, what, you need to talk to me? She's like, I need to talk to you. I'm talking to you right after the speech. So of course, I got to listen to a 45-minute presentation about school, sitting here thinking about who did I make mad over the last 5 years? What ex-girlfriend's aunt, mom, or cousin, or someone knows about me and is really, really mad about me? So suddenly she comes up and she goes, so Grant, you know, obviously you're transferring in from out-of-state school, and you're about to be a senior. And I go, yeah, for sure. And she goes, the problem is, you are a senior, but here you're a freshman. Only 6 of your classes transferred. That means 3.5 years of school just went down the drain. So I'm now 22 years old, I'm broke, I'm sleeping on a family member's couch, all of my friends are graduating, getting internships, getting all these opportunities, and I feel like I'm starting from scratch. So what I did is I said, you know what? I have no time to waste. I've groomed myself for the last 6 months. While 6 months to a year ago, I would have been scared, I would have been nervous, I wouldn't have known what to do next. I felt a calm spirit. I just felt like I knew what I needed to do next because I'd prepared so much sitting in that bookstore. Next thing you know, I applied to every sales job I could get. I got a sales job. I became one of the best salespeople in that company. I put together a detailed plan where I saved a minimum of 40% of my income for 2 years straight, invested all of that money, and took every single thing that I learned and built a successful residential and commercial solar company that now does business in 15 states across the United States. We've grown over 300%. We've had tremendous success. So how does someone in about a 4 to 5 year period go from absolutely nothing and not knowing what to do with their life to looking like they just have it all put together? The right information. The world is changing at such a rapid pace with AI, with technology, with social media, that if you don't adapt, you're going to be left behind. But what's interesting and what I found in my story, and also through connecting with others across the world, is we're entering a new age and a new economy that is decentralized. What I mean by that is a decentralized world economy where the best ideas, businesses, and people win. Not because you knew the right person, because you went to the right university, because you had a lot of resources behind your back. Does that help? Sure. But now we're entering a new age, no matter where you are at in the world. If you have access to working internet, you have the ability to change the world. So there's 3 key areas that every single one of you and anybody that's listening can implement into your own life today that can help you change the world and continue to make it a better place. Number 1, decentralized technology and information. The poorest person in the world right now who has access to working internet, if they can find working internet, has more information at their fingertips than kings and presidents from 100 years ago. One person has access. Everyone, I can see all in your laps and your hands, you're holding a smartphone that has more information than kings and presidents had 100 years ago. That is powerful. And what I learned from this is in my journey is all the things I learned were self-taught through studying the most successful people in the world that I wanted to groom and download all that information so I can implement it into my own life, into my family, into my employees, my business, my community, my country, and the world. And you can do the same. I'll give you an example. Just this week, I was traveling all the way to India, and especially at the beginning of the year, it's a good time to reflect. And I thought, I got to improve on these areas. I want to become a better leader. I want to get better at recruiting and working with certain types of people. I said, well, let's get on the internet. So I got onto YouTube and I started searching it. All of a sudden, an hour-long video came up where Ray Dalio, who created the largest hedge fund in the world, was having an hour-long conversation with Bill Belichick, who's a 6-time Super Bowl winning football coach in the United States, 2 arguably of the most successful people of the last 20 to 30 years, having a conversation about leadership and managing people. Think how hard it would be to have that exact same conversation, to be invited into that room, to be able to be at that conference, know that person, to hear that information that I just learned for free on the internet, just because I had internet. Information is power. And what I found is when you give people who are motivated to make a change in their life, their family's lives, in the world, you give them the potential resources to do so, they will build it. We've seen the growth in countries like India, in the Middle East, and Africa. And over the next 80 to 100 years, we're going to see remarkable leadership innovation all across the world that's going to shape and change humanity forever. It starts with information. The second is decentralized media. Traditionally, when you're looking at media, in the 20th century, it was controlled mostly by a few simple things: newspaper, radio, television, billboards, magazines. Which means if you weren't an unbelievably well-known person or had unbelievably high advertising budgets to spend millions of dollars to be on Fox, to be on CNN, to be on BBC, to be on the largest networks in the world, it was extremely difficult to grow your brand in business. Now, with social media, we have the ability to build our own media companies right from our smartphone with very little editing, resources, time, energy, and money. Just a hope that you want to expand and showcase your brand to the world, your ideas, what you believe in. What I noticed is happened over the last 4 to 5 years in the United States with the growth of podcasts, with the growth of YouTube. And for the last 3 or 4 years, the largest podcast in the United States is a Joe Rogan podcast. He's not what you would typically view someone that was extremely polished, that was on CNN or Fox, but he was authentic. He was unique. And one podcast episode, this was back in 2022, would average 11 million views per episode. Now, when you take a look at the US media market, in 2022, the person that was in second, Tucker Carlson with Fox News, had 3.24 million average viewers. So first place was 11 million, second place was 3.2 million. Massive gap. But this is where it gets even more interesting. Having your own voice and having a decentralized platform to speak your views freely and to actually be able to practice free speech is massive for the future of this world. So we can freely share our ideas similar to how we are today. What happened is Tucker Carlson and Fox had a falling out. They didn't like what he talked about. There was a lot of back-end politics that was occurring. So he started his own media company on X, which is formerly known as Twitter, and on his first episode, he had over 100 million views. 100 million views. This is the power of decentralized media. As I've seen this develop, and as I've been building and growing my business, I started following suit and just making organic content on social media. And now I've created a podcast and done really well in business. But what's so amazing about social media is just by creating a podcast, putting stuff out there, I've gained 1 million organic followers. My podcast is listened to in 126 countries, but this is the power of it. A 28-year-old from Texas without a college degree is speaking to you guys today in India. It's a lot of travel, 24 hours of travel to get here. I'm speaking to you today in India just because of my own media brand and from posting on social media. 50 years ago, you might have to work an entire lifetime to get the opportunity to speak to a group of people all the way across the world. This is how you can start doing the same. Third, and arguably, in my opinion, the most important, decentralized finance. So since 1944, the United States dollar has traditionally been the reserve currency of the world. Now, in 1971, Richard Nixon took the US dollar off of the US gold standard. It was traditionally backed by gold, which means it appreciated in value, and it was actually backed by something. But when they took it off the gold currency, what happened is it became 100% a fiat currency. I have a saying that if it's tied to people, it's corrupt. If people are involved, we're humans. We're going to make mistakes. But that's just the problem. In Washington, we have overspent so much that we have slowly deflated the purchasing power of the US dollar, which currently is the reserve currency of the world, but caused economic hardship all across the world. And if you were saving whatever currency that you operate in, and you are not getting the return at a minimum of inflation, then that means you are slowly losing your purchasing power. If you look at the world, 13% of the world uses the top 6 currencies. Only 13%. The US dollar, the euro, the British pound, the Canadian Australian dollar, and the Swiss franc, which means 87% of the rest of the world is dealing with the currencies that are more unstable, which cause economic hardship, sluggish GDP growth, and slows down international trade. Bitcoin changes this. Bitcoin is 100% decentralized, meaning no person, company, or country can dictate how many Bitcoins are circulating in supply. Right now it has a minimum supply of 19.6 million Bitcoins and a max supply of 21 million. Meaning they're not making more Bitcoins. Simple supply and demand, it drives the cost up. But many times people think Bitcoin, the importance of it is, if I buy it at this price and then it goes to this price, I'm rich. I see that a lot in the United States because we're very money driven, but we've been groomed to get just used to living with the US dollar and getting to not really realize how it's affecting people all across the world. This is the thing. Bitcoin gives an individual with working internet the ability to do international trade or business with any single person, business, or entity with no middleman. Right now, every single transaction under a fiat currency has multiple middlemen involved, charging you transaction fees, and many times even dictating if you can make the purchase. I saw this for the first time as I was actually entering the crypto space, and I was purchasing something overseas, an international business, and I couldn't even send the transaction for 3 days because of regulation, because of fees. They were blocking the purchase. I could have sent that same exact amount of money in a blink of an eye with no middleman involved with Bitcoin. When you look back and kind of step back and you guys look at your own life, whatever you guys do, whatever profession, whatever dreams, whatever desires that you have, decentralization is the key to giving the power back to the people and breaking the typical ordinary power structures the world has known so we can innovate, create unbelievable change, and push this world forward. So thank you.